Warren Woody Hoburg. He's an astronaut with NASA, and he provides a very different perspective. I mean, perspective in the true sense from a different angle altogether. What does the Earth look like from that perspective? Well, maybe he can tell us. May we request Warren Woody Hoburg to join us on stage? We are talking about zero gravity, infinite dreams, a seafarer's view of Earth. Over to you.
Thank you so much. It is a true honor to be with you today. I'm going to start with a bit of history. If you look at the left-hand photo on the screen, that is one of the last moments in recorded human history when all living humans were on Earth. This was October 31st of the year 2000 at Baikonur Cosmodrome in Kazakhstan. And on that day, the crew of Expedition 1 launched to the International Space Station. It was just 3 modules at the time, and they began a continuous presence in space that continues to this day, almost 25 years later. We built up the International Space Station module by module using the space shuttle as a workhorse, and by the year 2011, the space station looked something like this. Humans live in the pressurized modules running front to back in this photo, and the truss running left to right is unpressurized, so it's only accessible by spacewalk. This entire vehicle is solar powered. It's about 75 kilowatts on average power consumption. It's 1 million pounds of mass in low Earth orbit, about 450 metric tons, orbiting 400 kilometers above Earth. It travels just under 8 kilometers a second, and so astronauts on the space station see 16 sunrises and 16 sunsets every single day. Now, in May of 2020, a little American startup called SpaceX made history. They launched NASA astronauts Bob Behnken and Doug Hurley on a test flight of the Crew Dragon spacecraft. And this fundamentally changed our access to low Earth orbit. Bob and Doug spent about 2 months on the space station before they successfully returned home. And I actually didn't know it at the time, but I would eventually fly on Crew Dragon Endeavour, which is the same capsule as Bob and Doug, pictured here on the right. Less than a year after their flight, I was lucky enough to be named as the pilot of the Crew 6 mission up to the International Space Station. So I'll briefly introduce my crew from left to right in this photo. On the left side, Russian cosmonaut Andrei Fedyaev, Commander Steve Bowen, myself flying as pilot, and Sultan Al-Nayati, who is the first UAE astronaut to perform a long-duration mission, 6 months aboard the ISS. We trained for about 2 years and then found ourselves at Kennedy Space Center, ready for launch. We actually scrubbed our first launch due to a technical issue with our rocket, but about 3 days later, we were ready to try again.
Ready for an on-time launch for the instantaneous
10, 9, 8, 7, 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Engines full power, and liftoff of Crew 6. Go Dragon, go Falcon.
It's about 1.5 Gs in
Now launching on Endeavour's 4th flight to the International Space Station. Vehicle pitching downrange, 1.7 million pounds of thrust provided by the 9 Merlin 1D engines on the first stage.
And then this is our second stage engine. It builds up to about 4.5 Gs by the time the engine burns out.
There you can see on your screen, confirmation.
Dragon separation confirmed.
And so less than 12 minutes after launch, you're in space. This is our first time experiencing weightlessness. We spent about 24 hours phasing our orbit up to the International Space Station for our rendezvous. The crew on board got some really fun shots of us as we approached. You approach from below, and I still remember seeing that first view of the International Space Station through our thermal camera as we approached it. It's pretty fun, the first few days, experiencing weightlessness, living in low Earth orbit. Steve was our resident chef, famous for baking pies. And we had a great handover with Crew 5 that taught us all the tips and tricks to operating in weightlessness. We also got right to work. So we had a full complement of science experiments. This is the Japanese module of the space station, and you see our primary glove box oriented sideways. And working in the glove box there is American astronaut Frank Rubio, who has the current American record for duration of a single space flight, 371 days in space. It turns out that weightlessness causes heart tissue to age faster than it does on Earth, and we're using that as a model to study treatments for heart disease.
Sultan, we see that top one beating. Looks like happy heart cells.
So we all thought it was pretty cool the day that Sultan looked through the microscope and saw beating heart cell cultures. Just incredible. We also printed a section of human meniscus using a biofabrication facility. This is one of many tech demos on the space station, looking at ways we can use the unique weightless environment aboard. In addition to all the science, we have to perform all of the maintenance on board. So this is maybe some of the less glamorous work. This is fixing our toilet. We have to keep the spacesuits ready for action, so we perform regular maintenance on those. And I'll let you try to find me in this photo. This is fixing one of our CO2 scrubbing machines. You see my legs poking out from behind the rack. And this is how we get rid of trash. We load up these cargo vehicles and send them home to a destructive re-entry through Earth's atmosphere. We have a regular cadence of these cargo missions, always visiting ISS. Here, Frank and I are grappling the NG-19 vehicle with the Canadian robotic arm and berthing it to the bottom of Node 1. The team on the ground always works hard to send us fresh fruit and veggies with every new cargo vehicle arrival, so that's always a very special treat. And we also have to take care of ourselves. So this is Sultan running on our treadmill. It's actually mounted on the wall, so you run facing the floor. And we do about 2.5 hours of exercise every day. It's super, super important. So this is the resistance exercise in addition to the cardio that we do. I love chess, so I was able to get a chessboard sent up. And we actually played a few games, ISS crew versus mission control. Did about 1 or 2 moves every day, and we always picked out a flight controller from a specific console to make our move on our behalf on the board down in mission control. We also had visitors. So about midway through my mission, the crew of Axiom 2 flew their own Dragon spacecraft up to the ISS, and they spent about 8 days with us. Their crew included the first 2 Saudi astronauts to visit ISS, and we're super excited. This spring, the Axiom 4 mission, which is a similar mission, will be visiting ISS, and Shubhanshu Shukla will be on that mission. He will be the first Indian astronaut to visit the ISS. That's coming up this spring. I'm excited too. Now, during training, one of my favorite parts of training was EVA, or spacewalk training. We have this amazing facility in Houston called the Neutral Buoyancy Lab. It's very tactile, operating in a pressurized spacesuit, and so we spend about 6 hours underwater at a time practicing using our tools and practicing procedures for spacewalking. So I was absolutely thrilled when I learned that I would get to do 2 spacewalks during my mission to install 2 new ISS rollout solar arrays. Those are the rolls you see oriented vertically in this photo. Everything in space is hard, and this was no exception at all. So about 2 weeks before my spacewalks, we were flying over the Pacific Ocean, and we saw this storm. And unfortunately, that storm caused damage to a ground site in Guam that we use to communicate with our satellites that allow us to talk to mission control. So this meant that during my spacewalks, we knew in advance there would be long periods where we would not have coverage to talk to mission control. The entire team rallied. So Sultan and Frank set up this command post in the US laboratory. And in addition to their duties flying the robotic arm, they were prepared to walk myself and Steve, who were outside the space station, through all of our procedures and any possible malfunctions. I got a selfie right away when I had a moment outside. And Frank and Sultan flew me in the robotic arm over to the arrays where I unbolted it. This is the commute out to the work site. Those array units that I'm holding here, it's about 800 pounds of mass, 360 kilograms. So it's weightless, but it has inertia, so you really feel the inertia of that mass in your hands. After we completed the installation, Steve got this photo looking back at 2 Dragon spacecraft, the Crew 6 vehicle that I flew up in on the forward end of Node 2, and then on the top is CRS-28, the cargo vehicle that brought those arrays up to the space station. So that was a fast run-through of 6 months. So we spent 186 days in space, and it was, at that point, time to come home.
The Dragon hatch itself is closed, that coming at 4:19 a.m. Central Time.
You see the thrusters firing as we back away from space station.
Dragon SpaceX on the big loop.
Beautiful views.
Heartburn 1 is complete and nominal.
Sultan got this incredible view out the window of the plasma on the vehicle as we re-entered Earth's atmosphere. And then after entry, we
have
deployed,
fired, and we have good confirmation of drogue shoots. Two drogues.
Those drogues slow us down to about
4
200
parachutes,
kilometers
down to
an
point.
hour. And then we get main parachutes,
It's slow descent.
and we
There
splash
we can
down.
see splashdown
we splash
on
down
screen.
in some of the highest sea state today for any Dragon spacecraft. Amazing recovery team comes and rigs the vehicle, lifts it onto the recovery ship. And you see our smiling faces here after opening the hatch and getting outside the vehicle. Thank you. It was just the thrill of a lifetime getting to do this mission. I do want to spend a moment beyond sharing the experience of my mission, telling you a bit about where NASA is headed next. We are headed back to the moon with the Artemis program. And
our return to the moon will be different than the last time. We plan to explore more of the lunar surface.
Artemis 1 already
and
launched, so here's some highlights from Artemis 1.
Counting down to liftoff of Orion on its maiden voyage to the moon. And here we go.
Okay.
Hydrogen burn-off igniters initiate. 7, 6, 5. 4-stage engine start. 3, 2, 1. Boosters ignition. And liftoff of Artemis 1. We rise together back to the moon and beyond.
We are all part of something incredibly special, the first launch of Artemis.
This view of Earth from a human-rated spacecraft not seen since 1972 during the final Apollo missions.
Distant retrograde orbit. We're going to be about 38,000 miles away from the lunar surface. We're going beyond anywhere we ever went for Apollo.
The Orion spacecraft is barreling its way back home after circumnavigating the moon and beyond in an elliptical distant retrograde orbit. Splashdown. Orion back on Earth.
So here's where we're at in terms of Artemis. We're going to the moon. Artemis 1, you just saw the video. It already flew. That was an uncrewed mission and a super important test of the SLS rocket and the Orion spacecraft. The Artemis 2 crew has already been named. These are some of my best friends and colleagues, and they are training right now for their mission. They're going to fly out around the moon, further from Earth than any human has ever been, and they're going to test out the Orion spacecraft. And then the next mission after that is Artemis 3, and that will be that first surface landing on the moon since Apollo. From there, we're going to keep going. We're going to send a lot of hardware to the moon. We've got big plans. We're going to set up a sustained human presence on the moon and test out a lot of interesting tools and techniques. And why are we doing all this? We're going to the moon to set up a proving ground for Mars. So every single thing that we do and learn during this Artemis campaign will help us get to Mars eventually and send human beings to Mars. So I hope as you reflect on the themes of this summit, evolve, emerge, and expand, I hope that you'll think about how human spaceflight can help serve as an inspiration about how we can evolve, emerge, and expand our place in the solar system.
Wow. So wow. Thank you very much. Wow, Woody. I'm so in awe. I'm sure we all are. What an experience. It's almost like being there.
I still have goosebumps.
Yes, still some goosebumps.
I'm sure everyone else does too.
But conquering the final frontiers, and we're going way beyond. So this is something so to look forward to as we continue talking about evolving, emerging, and expanding. It's certainly something to think about what's out there and to explore and to be able to conquer in times to come.